July 8, 1941. The German Navy's headquarters in Berlin received a routine, encrypted message from one of its U-boats in the North Atlantic. The signal, like thousands before it, was composed on a machine the Germans believed was unbreakable. The Enigma, the marvel of engineering and mathematics, its constantly shifting electrical pathways produced hundreds of trillions of possible combinations. To the men who used it, Enigma represented absolute security. The message passed through the German command structure, decoded on another Enigma, and archived. It contained convoy positions, weather conditions, and the routine status of a patrol. Unremarkable, except that on the same morning, at a quiet English estate called Bletchley Park, another man read the exact same message in plain German. By the summer of 1941, Britain's codebreakers were reading the thoughts of the German Navy almost as quickly as Admiral Dönitz himself. And yet through the entire course of the war, even through the surrender in 1945, the Germans never realized it. Not one of them. This is the story of the greatest intelligence failure of the Second World War. How a nation of brilliant engineers, cryptographers, and military officers placed such faith in mathematics that they blinded themselves to the simplest truth. Their enemies could read their mail. To understand how such a colossal mistake was possible, we must go back almost a decade earlier to Poland in 1932. At that time, Europe was uneasy, but not yet at war. The German military had begun using the Enigma machine, a commercial cipher device adapted for military use. It was elegant and compact. 3 rotors, each with 26 electrical contacts representing the letters of the alphabet. With every keystroke, the rotors advanced, creating a constantly changing substitution pattern. In theory, it was impregnable. But at Poland's Cipher Bureau, 3 young mathematicians, Marian Rajowski, Yazi Rajitki, and Henryk Cegielski, refused to accept that any cipher was unbreakable. Using intercepted messages, theoretical mathematics, and a crucial bit of stolen information from a French intelligence agent, Rajewski reconstructed the internal wiring of the Enigma. By 1933, he could read German army messages with a machine of his own design. A mechanical aid he called the bomber cryptologne, the bombe. For 7 years, Poland read German military traffic in secret. When war loomed in 1939, the Poles realized their country would soon be invaded and their work lost. In July of that year, they shared everything. Their reconstructed Enigma code books and techniques with their British and French allies at a secret meeting near Warsaw. It was this act that would make Bletchley Park possible. When Germany invaded Poland that September, the Polish codebreakers fled. But their discovery traveled west, where a handful of mathematicians, linguists, and chess players began to build upon it. The British government transformed Bletchley Park, a quiet estate north of London, into the nerve center of an unprecedented codering effort. Among its new recruits was a young Cambridge mathematician named Alan Turing. Turing took Rajewski's concept of the bombe and redesigned it into a faster, more automated machine. His version, called the bombe, could test thousands of possible Enigma settings every minute. By late 1940, these machines, often run by women of the Women's Royal Naval Service, were breaking messages daily. At first, the British could read only Luftwaffe and army traffic. But it was the German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, that used the most complex Enigma with an extra rotor and stricter key procedures. The U-boats were sinking British shipping faster than it could be replaced. Britain stood on the brink of starvation. In May 1941, fortune struck. The German submarine U-110 was attacked and forced to surface by the Royal Navy. Its crew abandoned ship, believing it would sink. British sailors boarded and discovered the Enigma machine and codebooks intact. These materials provided the key for Bletchley to break the naval Enigma for the first time. From that moment, the tide of the Atlantic War began to shift. Each night, intercept stations around Britain captured streams of German Morse transmissions. These were sent by a teleprinter to Bletchley Park, where hundreds of analysts worked in silence, turning seemingly random letters into meaning. Every decoded message revealed convoy orders, U-boat rendezvous, minefield positions, even the personal concerns of officers at sea. The intelligence produced from these decrypts was codenamed Ultra. It became the most closely guarded secret of the war and known only to a handful of people at the highest levels of command. Churchill himself once said, "It was thanks to Ultra that we won." Yet even as German losses mounted, their faith in Enigma never wavered. Dönitz, the commander of the U-boat arm, blamed the setbacks on radar, superior Allied aircraft, and luck never on cryptanalysis. His diaries written throughout the war are filled with references to enemy location through radar or improved detection devices, but not a single mention of codebreaking. There were warnings, subtle but unmistakable. In 1941, after the capture of U-10, Captain Ludwig Stummel conducted an internal review. He discovered procedural breaches that could have compromised security, yet concluded the enemy could not possibly break Enigma because, in his words, the number of possible keys defies imagination. 2 years later, Swiss intelligence, neutral but observant, sent Berlin a report suggesting the Allies might be reading German signals. The report, dated August 10, 1943, warned that convoy ambushes and counter-operations were occurring with uncanny precision. Dönitz received it, read it, and dismissed it as nonsense. "Impossible," he wrote. "Our cipher is mathematically unassailable." Meanwhile, at Bletchley Park, the war of logic continued day and night. By D-Day, in 1944, the British were reading roughly 5,000 German messages every day. Ultra-decrypts guided Allied convoys, revealed troop movements, and exposed hidden minefields. They even allowed the Allies to feed false information back through controlled channels, an intricate web of deception that culminated in the success of the Normandy invasion. To protect Bletchley Park maintained absolute silence. Only a fraction of military officers knew the source of the intelligence. Reports were sanitized to appear as though they came from reconnaissance or captured documents. If a convoy was saved, it was credited to good luck. If a U-boat was destroyed, the Germans were told it was radar or improved tactics. The secrecy was total and so convincing that even after the war, the Germans remained unaware. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Allied interrogators asked captured officers whether they believed their codes had been read. The answer was almost always the same. No, never. The few who had considered it dismissed the idea as impossible. They trusted mathematics, and mathematics, they believed, had not betrayed them. In the post-war years, Dönitz, who had briefly succeeded Hitler as head of state, stood trial at Nuremberg. In his testimony, he attributed the U-boat defeat to Allied radar, aircraft, and superior production. Not once did he suspect that the enemy had been listening to his every order. For nearly 30 years after the war, the truth remained hidden. The men and women of Bletchley Park, bound by the Official Secrets Act, said nothing. Their work was classified, their achievements unrecognized. Even family members had no idea what they had done. Then in 1974, a British officer named F.W. Winterbotham published a book called The Ultra Secret. It was the first public revelation that the Enigma had been broken. The news stunned the world, but none were more shocked than the Germans themselves. At that time, Admiral Dönitz was 83 years old, living in retirement near Hamburg. When told that the Allies had read his naval signals throughout the war, he reportedly refused to believe it at first. Later, after being shown documentation, he became silent for a long time. According to those present, he said softly, "Then everything we did was for nothing." In 1978, at a conference in Germany, former German officers met for the first time with Allied codebreakers who had worked at Bletchley Park. The meeting was cordial, but the emotional weight was immense. The Germans expressed disbelief that such a vast operation could have remained secret for so long. The British, for their part, expressed admiration for the discipline and brilliance of the men they had outwitted. By then, historians were beginning to assess the true impact of Ultra. Sir Harry Hinsley, the official historian of British intelligence, concluded that the information gained from Enigma shortened the war by 2 to 4 years. Without it, the Battle of the Atlantic might have been lost, D-Day delayed, and millions more lives lost on both sides. To the Germans, it was a bitter realization that their greatest strength, their faith in reason and order, had become their greatest weakness. The mathematics of Enigma had indeed been sound. What failed was not the machine, but the human belief that it could never be undone. The magnitude of that failure lies not only in the loss of ships or men, but in the failure of imagination. The Germans conducted several investigations into potential leaks. Yet each time they reached the same conclusion, that Enigma was mathematically secure. They measured risk only by theory, never by evidence. When U-boats were sunk moments after transmitting their coordinates, they searched for radar reflections, not for compromised ciphers. When convoys altered course away from their patrol lines, they assumed coincidence. The idea that the enemy could read every signal seemed so absurd that it was never truly tested. The British, meanwhile, learned a very different lesson, that no system, however sophisticated, is invulnerable. They treated Enigma not as an unbreakable wall, but as a puzzle with patterns waiting to be found. Their success lay not only in machines, but in people. In mathematicians, linguists, and clerks who combined logic with creativity, patience with intuition. At its height, Bletchley Park employed nearly 9,000 people, 80% of them women. Most worked in silence, never knowing the full picture of what they contributed to. Some operated bombe through the night, listening to the constant whir of rotors. Others translated the decrypted messages, typing them on flimsy paper before they vanished into secure envelopes marked most secret. A few analysts, such as Mavis Batty, made breakthroughs that turned the course of naval engagements. Her decrypt of Italian naval traffic in 1941 helped lead to the British victory at Cape Matapan, yet none could speak of it afterward. Ultra's success depended on this secrecy. If even a hint had reached the Germans, it would have changed their cipher procedures and the advantage would have been lost. To maintain that secrecy, the Allies sometimes made cruel choices, allowing attacks to proceed when intervention would reveal that Enigma was compromised. The logic was brutal, but necessary. Sacrifice a few to save many. In this sense, Ultra was not only a triumph of intellect, but also a study in moral restraint. The people who knew could not act freely on what they knew. It was intelligence balanced against conscience. After the war, many of these workers returned to ordinary lives, carrying a secret that even their spouses did not suspect. Some lived and died without ever being publicly acknowledged. Only decades later did the scale of their contribution emerge, revealing that they had quietly shaped the modern intelligence world. The revelation of Ultra in the 1970s forced historians to reevaluate nearly every major campaign of the Second World War. What had seemed like luck or tactical brilliance was often grounded in knowledge drawn from Bletchley. The sinking of the Bismarck, the success of North African operations, the containment of the U-boat menace, all were touched directly or indirectly by the silent work of the codebreakers. For Germany, the revelation prompted introspection. The archives showed that several individuals had indeed come close to realizing something was wrong. Signals officers had noticed that the Allies sometimes reacted too quickly to encrypted orders. A few mathematicians within the cipher office proposed that operational mistakes might have exposed patterns. Yet each time their reports were dismissed. The logic was circular. Since Enigma was mathematically secure, any evidence of compromise had to be coincidence. This illustrates a deeper failure: the inability of institutions to question their own assumptions. German intelligence possessed brilliant minds and advanced tools, but it lacked skepticism. Its analysts operated within a rigid hierarchy that discouraged dissent. The British, by contrast, encouraged unconventional thinkers. At Bletchley, eccentricity was almost a qualification. Mathematicians, poets, chess champions, and crossword solvers worked side by side, united by curiosity rather than rank. That culture of intellectual freedom proved decisive. In retrospect, the Enigma story is not only about cryptography, it is about the psychology of certainty. The Germans believed that perfect design guaranteed security. The Allies believed that any design, no matter how elegant, concealed a flaw. One side worshipped precision. The other exploited imperfection. By 1945, the result was stark. 783 U-boat destroyed. 1 submariners dead. 3/4 of the entire U-boat force. Every loss recorded by Dönitz, as a consequence of radar or aircraft, was in truth often guided by ultra-intelligence. Even when U-boat adopted new tactics or shifted patrol zones, their communications betrayed them. Enigma did not fail them. Their faith in it did. The irony is that the Germans themselves had a unit dedicated to signals intelligence, the BINST, which had achieved early success breaking Allied codes. Yet, even as they read enemy traffic, they never considered that the enemy might be doing the same. When the BINST began losing access to Allied communications later in the war, they assumed the Allies had improved discipline. Not that British cryptographers had surpassed them. After 1945, as Western intelligence services absorbed the lessons of Bletchley Park, cryptography entered a new era. Machines gave way to electronic computers, many inspired by the innovations created to attack Enigma. The principles of modern computing, automation, pattern recognition, and algorithmic logic were born in those wooden huts in Buck in Cheshire. Alan Turing's theoretical work during this period laid the foundation for what we now call computer science, but the operational lesson was equally profound. The success of Ultra demonstrated that intelligence could shape entire wars, not merely by informing commanders, but by enabling them to act with near-omniscient awareness. It also proved that secrecy can be both a weapon and a burden. The very success of Ultra depended on the Germans' ignorance, which had to be preserved even at terrible cost. When Dönitz finally accepted the truth in the 1970s, his reaction encapsulated the human cost of misplaced certainty. For decades, he had studied his war diaries, convinced he had been defeated by material odds. Now he realized he had been out-hot, not outbuilt. The U-boat arm's bravery and sacrifice had been nullified by information, invisible, intangible, and relentless. In intelligence circles, the Enigma episode became a case study in analytic failure. How could an entire command structure ignore evidence so compelling? The answer lies in institutional psychology. When a belief is collectively reinforced, contrary data becomes invisible. Dönitz's subordinates did not dare challenge the premise that Enigma was secure. When they investigated losses, their conclusions always aligned with what superiors wanted to hear. The Allies, meanwhile, took meticulous steps to disguise the effectiveness of Ultra. They created parallel explanations for every success, attributing victories to radar, reconnaissance, or lucky sightings. They even staged missions to make these explanations appear plausible. As a result, the Germans' misconceptions were continually validated. Their own logic trapped them. By the late 20th century, historians began to view Enigma not just as a wartime episode, but as a paradigm of information warfare. The conflict between belief and evidence, secrecy and exposure, continues in modern intelligence work. Encryption remains a contest between codemakers and codebreakers, but the real struggle lies in the minds of those who must decide what to trust. The Enigma story thus teaches three enduring lessons. First, that technical perfection does not guarantee security. Every system depends on human vigilance. Second, that secrecy, though powerful, carries moral weight. Its protection can demand silence even from those who deserve recognition. And third, that intelligence, while invisible, can alter history as surely as any weapon. By the time the secret was fully declassified in the 1990s, most of the original Bletchley workers had passed away. Their legacy endures in every modern computer, in every encrypted message, and in every intelligence agency that now studies both the code and the coder. The Germans never knew during the war. Many never lived to learn afterward, but history now records what they could not see. That the greatest battles of the Second World War were fought not only on land, sea, and air, but in the realm of thought. In the final analysis, the Enigma affair is not merely a story of triumph or failure, it is a mirror reflecting the nature of knowledge itself. The Germans possessed the finest technology of their age, yet they failed to question their assumptions. The British possessed fewer resources, yet they succeeded because they doubted. In intelligence, as in science, progress begins where certainty ends. And so the war of machines became ultimately a war of minds. A silent contest where the loudest weapon was belief, and the deadliest weakness was confidence. The Germans never knew, and that ignorance, more than any Allied weapon, shaped the course of the Second World War.